very important points to this guy clearly enough, and that, that we were not collaborating really honestly. And I think that, I've been working on my own for far too long, and I'm still learning about the art of collaboration. I'm not good at it yet, and I need to be, because you can't work in theatre or in film or in any of these mediums as a writer unless you can collaborate and be part of a team. I think I'm okay at being part of a team, but I find it very hard to sit down and write with somebody else. It seems like oh God, I don't know how it seems. It's strange.
Mm-hmm.
I've never done it before. I mean, the only time I've come close to it is as an editor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I find it very hard.
Just not in a musical context. It's not something that comes naturally.
No.
Okay. There were questions here about why you've always been revered by youth on the cutting edge, as it were. When you were mods, when punk was all the rage back in '77, '78. That there always seemed to be a lot of affection and appreciation for the Who. Is there a universality to what you've been doing?
I don't know. Is that for me to say? I don't really know. I mean, I've never really quite. I've always been very grateful, but I've just always analysed it that we were with a number of other bands in the '60s were kind of the first on our block to steal R&B and turn it into pink music. I don't know.
Okay. Couldn't think of a pithy comment for that one, eh? Good enough. And this guy asked you to look back on the day of the mod 30 years later. You talked about it a little while ago and what it might mean to the Japanese. Looking back in retrospect, what does it mean to you?
Well, I remember it as being just not what I expected. I'd already, when I was about 17, 18, 19, that kind of age, I'd already found myself as part of a new fellowship, which I discovered at art school. I went to art school when I was 16, and what I found were people that liked to talk and liked to exchange ideas and liked discussing the creative process and liked to work with abstract ideas, and I suppose they liked being pretentious. I don't know, but whatever it was, I felt comfortable there, and as part of that, at that time, which is 1961, I went to art school. I heard a lot of jazz and R&B, a lot of black music that I hadn't heard before for the first time. But I also heard a lot of American music that I hadn't heard before. Like I hadn't heard any of the political minstrels. I hadn't heard. Well, I'd heard them, but I didn't know what they were. I didn't know about Joan Baez or Bob Dylan or Pete Seeger or any of those guys. And it was a huge thing for me to go through.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I felt like a bit of an imposter, because I was, after all, a kid from West London, and obviously a lot of these people were kids from West London. But I was a kid from West London, and I didn't feel entirely comfortable somehow. So when the Who started to do shows and we started to find this audience who had at the same time also discovered black music, these were people that that hadn't been to art college. These were people that were clerks in banks and kids that worked in advertising agencies and dustmen and postmen and bus drivers and people like that, who had also discovered New Orleans dance music and Tamla Motown and stuff like that through being exposed to it in London dancing clubs. It was, I don't know, it kind of, it drew some strings together. It made me feel that the inner recognition of the music that I had tied in with something about who I was and where I'd grown up. And what the mod movement did is it tied that up under a philosophical under a philosophical banner. And I suppose the philosophy in a nutshell was that you know, you can be ordinary, but you can also be special.
Okay.
Even with very limited resources, even if you're a very simple soul,
Right.
you can simply decide that you are going to be an ace face. You can simply decide that you're going to be cool, and you can be cool. And I think that also was something that was borrowed from, you know, black behaviour, particularly in the UK, from observing Caribbeans. And I think all this hit me like a flash when the Who were playing at the Aquarium Ballroom in Brighton in 1964. I was 19 years old. You know, I was still going to art school, even though the Who were performing. We were called the High Numbers then. I was still going to art school every now and again because I didn't want to lose my grant. And suddenly there I was on the beachfront, you know, wearing my, what to me was stage clothes, you know, my mod outfit, with a bunch of mod kids, and you may have read about this particular moment, you know, or heard about this moment that, you know, I've spoken about a couple of times before. I just felt, I don't know, I felt bigger because I was, you know, I was less me and more one of the crowd. I felt, you know, that I found myself through losing myself. I know it sounds incredibly pompous, but that's what I felt.
No, that's quite an amazing story because it gives, I guess it gave your identity a context, and
that's right.
Maybe that's the universality of Pete Townsend and the Who. I mean, because it seems like when you look at youth movements, isn't that always the objective, and isn't that always the ultimate gratification when you are able to find a place for yourself?
Well, I think it is. I think what older people will do is they'll look at it knowingly and you know, with a certain amount of sanguinity and say, well, hold on a minute, don't they realise that that's what art is? Or go even further and say, don't they realise that's what family is, or that's what society is, or that's what life is? But you have to be led into these wisdoms. And although, you know, R&B and jazz were very important to me as a young man, the mod movement was what in the UK, you know, being with a bunch of working class blokes down in Brighton, was what really made it all seem right to me. Now I believe that it led me to a great understanding of the importance of congregation. You know, the congregation of like-minded spirits, whether it's at a football match or a concert or you know, even even a techno, you know, rave joint, is what people lose themselves by being together. And I think it's as close as a lot of us get to a genuine spiritual moment in our lives.
Yeah. And I guess it's also very important at the same time that the people get the feeling that they carved it out of nothing, that they made it happen, that they sort of willed it to happen.
Or that it was inspired by a like-minded group of people. I know for West London mods, you know, I used to think, God, this is so hypocritical. Here we are kind of playing black music, but, you know, we haven't suffered like they've suffered. We've never been slaves. And I remember a few kids used to turn on me and say, you know, angrily, well, Pete, you may not have been a fucking slave, but I'm a slave. You should try coming and doing the job I do.
That's right. So there are people out there really singing the blues.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, well, that's great. There's one last question here, and I hate this question because it is so glib, but I will ask it anyway because that's what they're paying me to do. And it's about the hope I die before I get old line from my